Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers.
And we'll reveal the writing secrets that college forgot to teach you.
AI in writing is all the rage, but how do you use AI for writing to your audience? This episode reveals how to use generative AI for writing and discusses the future of generative AIs for writing and communication. Oliver has a PhD in cybernetics from the University of Reading in England. He also has specialties in liquid droplet robotics, biomimicry, signal processing, and robotic self-organization. Now, Oliver works as the customer support and community manager at Scholarcy, which is an artificial intelligence and AI that converts your documents into an interactive summary flashcard that gives you context and highlights key information for the documents you put into the AI. Now, today we're talking with Oliver about artificial intelligence. You heard his background. This is the guy to know with robotics and crafting documents using audience awareness. Oliver, let's first start with Scholarcy because I doubt my description really did it justice. What is Scholarcy and what is its goal?
Thanks for the introduction. So the goal of Scholarcy is to democratize knowledge. Academic articles are pretty difficult to approach reading, and so why shouldn't there be a tool that makes it much more accessible, faster and easier for you to read? And that's why Scholarcy was invented. So it would transform any article you put into it. It could be an academic article, a textbook chapter, a YouTube video, for example, there's a transcript, and it will convert these into these interactive flashcards and make it much more approachable to start reading. It will identify where all of the important information is for you, so it makes it easier to refer back if you need to revise something, or just skim read something, or deep dive.
You kind of answered my next question, but I'm hoping you can elaborate on that. It sounds like this is something that not only academic researchers can use. Outside of academia, organizations deal with a lot of information, and they could use this tool as well. What are some possible uses outside of academia that you all can help with?
Yeah, so it's not just academic articles. It might be an industry report or any document that might be quite complicated that you might benefit from having our summaries to break down for you. And I think one of the bigger factors as well, which we have a lot of people outside of academia using Scholarcy for, is the organizational approach to this. So it has a library system built in, which means that it becomes much harder to lose documents. One of the default file names for a PDF ends up being just a bunch of characters like random letters and numbers. Scholarcy automatically renames the document to the title. So it's easy to be lazy and just go, okay, I'm going to read this, drag that PDF in or drag those 10 PDFs in, and then they're automatically named for you. So the effort approach is much easier for you. And we also integrate with a lot of third-party apps. So if you want to read in Word or PowerPoint, if you want to make a literature synthesis matrix in Excel, it's one click to do that. If you want to manage your references for a report that you're writing, you can go straight from Scholarcy into the RAS format, which will then work with any citation manager. And we work with second brain apps. So if you use Obsidian or Notion for your team to manage all of that literature, all of that information, or just on your solo project, it's one click to export into those formats from Scholarcy. So the workflow is really, really heavily supported because it just makes everything a lot nicer, a lot more efficient.
This is good information to know. I am finishing my doctorate and working on my dissertation this year. And so this is great information to know. Now, one of the things we talk a lot about here at Hurley Write, especially when it comes to AI, is the private and sensitive information, the intellectual property aspect of things. How does Scholarcy do things a little bit differently? How do they protect all of those aspects?
Sure. So any articles that you import, for one of that, it's encrypted on both ends, and we delete everything once we transform it. Any of the articles that you import go through our proprietary algorithms before we use any third-party LLMs. So if you upload an industry report, none of the whole document doesn't get sent over to a third-party LLM. So it's only the highlights that are then transformed with generative AI into something different. The synopsis, for example, to make it easier for you to write, for you to read even. And all of that is locked down. Nobody else can access your flashcards. We're not a distribution service. So if you upload something confidential, nobody else is going to be able to read it unless you share it with them. And we've made it difficult enough to share libraries that you can't accidentally share them, but also easy enough that if you need to share your libraries with somebody else, a couple of clicks and then they get it.
So it sounds like whatever you put in doesn't come out without any of your permission. Is that correct, Oliver?
Yeah, nailed it.
And this is going to sound stupid, but I have to ask, what is an LLM?
LLM stands for large language model.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
Hey, we learn something new every day, right?
Exactly.
Now, we have been learning a lot about AI, especially in the last couple of years, and I've done some research on this and did some experimenting with ChatGPT about the accuracy. And one of the things I discovered was when I put an article into ChatGPT and asked it to summarize it, just by way of experimentation, in case any of my professors are listening, it came out completely different. The summary had nothing to do with the actual article. How do you address that, as that producing that accurate representation? That's something that I'm guessing a lot of folks are concerned about.
It's a good concern, yeah. And one of the things Scholarly does differently to a lot of ChatGPT wrappers is all of the kind of pre-processing before the summary is delivered to you. So our CEO, Phil Gooch, he did his PhD in natural language processing at City of London University, and he's been able to develop algorithms that Scholarly uses to go through, and essentially it knows where in the text the important parts are. So this is the kind of the really low level description. It knows in the text where the important information is. And it was trained on over 10,000 articles. And so it's become pretty accurate at finding the important information. And then that information can be fed back to third-party LLMs to generate a summary. And we also present all of the extracted text. One of the things that sets Scholarly apart is that all of the original citations are essentially, all of that context is retained. So if you read something and maybe you don't trust it because you think that's quite a strange claim that's been made, or maybe you think, oh, really interesting, let's do my own research into this, you can find the points backing that up. If they claim to have contrasted or confirmed some previous findings, which is generally what you look for in an article that's a follow-up study, you can find in the original article in one click, you can find the exact point where they've talked about the cited article. So you can go and investigate this for yourself. You can see, they've said that this paper did this. I'm not so sure about that. Where have they said that? Where's the citation? How can I dig into this on my own? And so it makes it really easy for you to be really critical in how you evaluate whatever you read. Yeah.
It's interesting you say distrust, Oliver, because I am naturally distrustful of AIs. I've seen the movie I, Robot. I have concerns on how this will end.
This is a hill she will die on. Truth.
Pretty much. But I understand AI is pretty much here, and I'm not going to be an old fuddy-duddy that says, get off my lawn, kids, and get your AI out of my computer. So we have to accept it. The AIs, we've seen and heard some concerning things about AIs, generative AIs, meaning those that take supposedly create new things from a data set, whatever that may be, and how those AIs may be impacted by bias and incorrect information. So nothing that necessarily has values, it's just wrong. Because AI doesn't necessarily know what's biased or what is unacceptable or what is incorrect. It's kind of trying to please you. That's the main goal. So how does Scholarly know whether something's incorrect or biased?
It's a good question. So there's kind of two parts where there can be incorrect information or bias. The first part is before it even goes into Scholasy, it's the original article. What does Joe Blogs, whoever's writing it, what do they say in there? Where does their bias come from? Where does their information come from? And part of the role for the reader is to kind of evaluate and really criticize the information that you're getting. In an academic context, it's especially true. In the real world, there's less of an implication for this, but you should still look at these sources and think, is that trustworthy? Should I trust the words that I'm reading? And so this links back to retaining the original citations. If so-and-so lead author, whoever, writes something, how can you critically evaluate that on your own with or without AI tools? And so we have the citations, we have other people citing their work. There's that whole chain of citations essentially in academia, that's one factor. That's why we allow people to really easily access anything that's cited in the original work. And you can look at the previous works that have been referenced and look at how they've approached something, what results have they got, do I trust what I'm reading in this article? So we've made that really, really efficacious in Scholasy because it's really easy to open up the original cited articles through the article that you're currently reading. And with when we transform articles, how do we make sure that we're not introducing bias or incorrect information? And that loops back to Phil's expertise in being able to identify in any given article where the important information lies, and an awful lot of prompt engineering to make sure that no hallucinations are involved. I've tried to understand how he does it, and no NDA needed because I don't know it that well. So essentially, there's a lot of prompt engineering to make sure that the extracted summaries that we take out don't then get mistransformed into something incorrect. And there's an awful lot of research and development that goes on. There's constant updates. It can be hard to keep up. If I take a week off of work, I come back and I'm scrolling through Basecamp going, I have like a PhD thesis worth of work here almost to catch up on. So yeah, there's a lot of research into this.
So it sounds like it's constantly in development, but ultimately I kept hearing you say, well, the reader and the writer still have to use their thinking. They still have to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. And I think that's one thing society's missing as we go into this AI frenzy, right? There's so many commercials about AI.
Yeah.
You can't throw away the human. You'll never be able to divorce the human from the AI. It's kind of like the human has to manage the machine in order for it to be correct, in order for it to be non-biased and do what you want it to do. And I want to ask you, Oliver, because you're the robotics guy, where do you see other generative AIs, not necessarily Scholasy, but AI use go with this? How do we fix this in the future to avoid bias and incorrect information in generative AIs?
So there's kind of two approaches that I can think of. There's the idealistic one, which is that we have essentially peer-reviewed systems for any language models that come out. And so everyone can look into a published model and say, okay, this is factual, this doesn't have any bias, I can accept this. In the same way that I can go on Twitter right now and I can spout whatever nonsense I'd like to, or I can publish an article and it can go through rounds and rounds of rigorous academic peer review, and then you pay a lot of money and then it can be published in a trusted source. That would be quite idealistic and very difficult to actually put into practice. What I think is more likely going to happen is people will have locally hosted models. So you can go, I trust so-and-so data scientist, or I trust blah, blah news anchor. I'm going to download their model, and I'm going to run that on my computer, and anything that I put into it stays in my server or on my laptop, depending on how small the model can be. And you only go to a trusted source where you think, okay, I know I can read into the data set that they've trained this on. I can evaluate this. And I think there'll be tools for evaluating the data sets separate to the language model itself, which is turtles on top of turtles on top of turtles. But there will be AI tools to essentially evaluate how good AI tools are, and then there will be the tools to evaluate those ones potentially. But you will have a trusted model from somebody that maybe they have a reputation in the industry, or maybe they have validated their model against benchmarks. And you can take that model, you can host it in your organization, in your home server, you put all of your data into it, and then it only stays in that system. You can use whatever output you get from it for whatever reason you'd like. It could be writing, it could be evaluating something, it could be summarization, but you know the variables going into it.
You said something interesting, Oliver. You said the variables going into it, and it sounds like no matter what, you're going to get a language model from some perspective. It may be a perspective you trust, but that perspective will still have biases. There's this concept of situated knowledge where all knowledge is impacted by something, whether it's where you are in life, what it's your belief system, whatever it is. It almost sounds like we can't get away from that in the future.
Very internal bias is one of the hardest things to recognize. There are these thought experiments where you can essentially test yourself, like, do I have an unrecognized bias on this? And they're really, really hard to do. And you hear stories about this bias coming up, and even looking at, there's a case study, I heard this at a roundtable for EDI recently, where Amazon essentially took all of their CVs that they'd ever been submitted, and they took all of the ones which led to people being hired, and they found that the AI that they trained was really heavily biased towards white guys with Germanic names. And that was based off of their previous hiring practices, which means that the people in the organization had that bias. And Amazon are a big company, they're subject to a lot of scrutiny. You can't just get a job there because you know somebody that works there. It's gone beyond that point. There are lots of laws to prevent that kind of discrimination, and it's still happened.
That explains why my resume to Amazon got thrown out. Amazon. Mm-hmm.
Well,
and the hallucination, Sarah actually experienced a hallucination with one of the
Right.
AIs, right, Sarah?
I did.
Okay.
As part of my experiment, I went in and asked my ChatGPT if I could give it a name. And I said, is it okay if I call you Herman? And ChatGPT said, yes, that would be fine. And so I said, okay, Herman, thank you so much. And it wrote back and said, thank you, Herman, you're welcome. And I said, no, you're Herman, I'm Sarah. And and again, it was part of my experiment to see, again, user words, user prompts, and how, again, ChatGPT is going to, or other generative AI is going to say exactly what you want to please you. I mean, essentially. So
Yeah.
me and Herman, we're still developing our ongoing rapport. He has a lot to learn. But let me zoom out for a second, and again, that kind of ties in with what I just talked about. I'm someone who was doing experiments and some research with generative AI. At Hurley Write, we work with a lot of folks who are using generative AI, ChatGPT, internally, or internal AI systems to help them craft reports and things like that. What advice would you give for folks in general who are using these tools, whether it's sort of under the table or the internal thumbs up approved AI? What advice would you give to them? Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but there's a lot of good that can come from it.
We'll use the bike analogy, where you start off with the training wheels before you jump on a street bike and go down the dual lane highway. It's something to practice with first. And there are ways to improve, and there are ways to learn how to use these tools. But you would never give an apprentice a tool and just go, "Oh, go and work on that car," or, "Oh, okay, go and fix that a hole in that roof," for example. You teach them how to use the tool before they're released into the wild, before they get their certification and they get shoved out into the real world and they have to use it on their own. unsupervised. Play around with these tools, and you can get a lot of benefit from using them. From my personal perspective with this, I wouldn't use generative AI to write the entirety of a document, but I would use it in the same way that I can prompt AI to get something out. I can prompt the AI to prompt me. I can say, okay, I want to write a blog on this thing. These are my SEO key phrases I want to use. This is the main topic. Give me 3 main bullet points to touch on, and I can get the structure. And then at that point, it's just a to-do list. I can just go, okay, I need to write the opening paragraph. I need to write the main body here. I need to touch on these 3 points here. Humans are pretty good. If I said to you, okay, go and do a PhD on your own, it's pretty tough. But if I said, okay, here's a PhD supervisor, and they're gonna have this iterative feedback loop where they say, oh, this is why it's not worked, or oh, why don't you try this? And you get this to-do list generated from an external body. And that's a really good thing. Like, a lot of humans react really well to being told a to-do list. There's something that maybe they take it on their own terms, because RSD is a thing. Pathological demand avoidance, even not RSD. But you can give somebody an idea of what would help, and it becomes much easier to get this abstract goal achieved because there is something to work towards. You can use AI like this. You can make ChatGPT or whatever give you prompts, and that can make the writing process much smoother because you have this kind of story to go through. You can then put all of the important information in there yourself. You can make sure that it's factual because you can check the trusted source. You're the one writing it into that document. But if it gives you a template to work with, aren't templates the best when it comes to writing, or a PowerPoint presentation? Do a PowerPoint from scratch versus having a template. So much easier. It's so much faster. And you can use your brain for the hard bit, not for the structuring part. The how do I order this? You can just get the computer to tell you what to do.
In other words, using it as a thought partner rather than someone to do the work for you. And that goes into something we talk a lot about with our clients, and that's critical thinking skills. And I think sometimes when it comes to generative AI, it's tempting to not use our critical thinking skills, especially when we're in a hurry to get things done. Critical thinking skills, a lost art, something we all can work on. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to writing?
Yeah, I think the way that you call critical thinking will change drastically in the next 5 years. And I think if you compare what you call critical thinking now and how you would apply critical thinking is way different to what you would look at somebody thinking critically 100 years ago, because the mediums are changing. I think that prompt engineering will become a tool for most people, not just people that work in data science and AI. And I think that the ability to dig deeper into sources will become a lot more prevalent, where people have to say, well, let's look at this person's profile on Instagram or on Twitter or X. What other credentials have they have? Oh, look at that. The account is 2 weeks old and they've just fired off a load of political tweets. Maybe they're trying to stir something up. Or maybe you click onto it and, oh, okay, they've been a professor for the last 20 years. Maybe that tweet about vaccines probably is trustworthy. Maybe it isn't. Maybe you go onto their Google Scholar profile and they're a geologist. They have nothing to do with vaccine research and they were lying. Or maybe they're the head of biological sciences and they've been researching vaccines for their entire career. This critical evaluation will be tested a lot more because it's so much easier to get misinformation. 100 years ago, if someone told you a lie, it might take you a week potentially to fact check it, because you might have to phone up or maybe go cycle to a library and ask them to fact somebody, to then have a journal posted to you, and then you have to pore through the pages yourself to then read it and understand it yourself. That's a very different scenario to today, where you can go on Google Scholar, you can find an academic's email address and just drop them a line. They love it. Anyone listening in the audience that has never done this, you will get the best response. I had like 2 A4 page email within half an hour from somebody once, and it seemed to have made their day. It made my day much easier during my PhD. But these are the skills that will become more tested.
I like that. New literacy skills, go along with new media.
Yeah.
And as the world change, we have to change too. And I think that's something people miss. They go, "Well, I learned this back in college." That's nice. You haven't been in college for 20 years. Things change, mediums
Yeah.
change, and you need training, you need help with that, and adding new tools such as prompt engineering training. In all honesty, Hurley Write does have these tools. You should check them out if you're listening now. But I want to go back to Scholarcy for a moment, Oliver, and ask you specifically about your job and the kind of writing you do in your job. So, what do you do as a customer support and community manager?
It's a good question. So we're still a startup. It's a fairly lean team. So I do wear lots of hats. The customer support side of it is quite often technical questions. So these vary in type. It could be somebody literally saying, "Why won't my card payment go through?" all the way through to something complicated like, "Okay, so I have a collection of literature. How do I now create a literature synthesis matrix? How do I go through and analyze and compare these?" And so there's very different ends of the spectrum for those types of questions. With the community management side of it, I do a fair amount of social media posts. So these can range from tutorial videos where I'm essentially teaching and marketing the tools that we have across different platforms, all the way through to going to in-person events. So we go to conferences a few times a year, and I get to plan the approach that we're going to take with talking to maybe their librarians, maybe their EDI professionals across the board. Every single day is different. And in the last couple of months, we've been doing a lot of research to changing the flashcards. So we've had a very different past fortnight, at least, compared to when I first started. And that's what I like. I liked grad school because there were lots of different things for me to be doing. And now in a startup, I have a ton of different things, which works really well for my brain, because if I get not burnt out on something, if I've got stuck into something and I can feel myself losing productivity, I have a to-do list with 20 other things on it that I can jump into. I don't just do one thing. So that works really well for me.
I think that's something we both can relate to with the many hats we wear at Hurley Write. And so you're the people guy and the robot guy. You're kind of the person standing in the gap, helping folks out.
Yeah, pretty much.
I love it. I love it.
And that connects a lot with audience, right, Sarah?
Yes. Yes, it's about knowing your audience. Tell us a little bit about why really thinking about your audience is so important when it comes to the writing that you do in the workplace and in interacting with others. We say writing is communication, right? So these are communication skills when we're writing in the workplace.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, since our user base ranges from brand new undergrads all the way through to seasoned professionals and professors and postdoctoral researchers. And so the age range for the tool might be 18 to 80 kind of range. I don't know the oldest person I've communicated with, but I've had some older people. You can tell from maybe the writing style, but knowing the assumed knowledge that you can apply to somebody is a big factor for this. So somebody that maybe the way that they've emailed me alludes to lower tech literacy, I'm not going to give them a single line instruction like, "Oh, just do this." It's going to be broken down, or maybe I even send a video showing myself following the instructions. And so translating all of that and any posts that we do for email campaigns, or maybe it's for something I've put onto Twitter, for example, all of those audiences are very different. And I think one of the main things to consider is that a lot of the time with email, one-on-one side of it, if they don't understand something, they're going to come back to you. There's that feedback loop that we have in real life. And it's a good way to take anyone that's maybe stressed about doing public speaking or doing something like this where they're interviewing somebody. There's that natural back and forth that you can use to your advantage. You can learn more information. You can essentially glean more about how you can communicate with that person. And all of that then helps the next time. So the next person that emails in, you've got that bit more experience, that little bit more information about communication. It's this iterative process. You just get better at it the more you practice it.
So when you're working with different audiences, do you have a strategy for giving yourself, I always call it fences, to determine if you're giving them too much or not enough? I mean, that ties in with being aware of your audience as well.
It's an interesting one. I feel like I do that quite intuitively. I was thinking about the question from the questionist which you emailed over before, and a lot of
Oliver,
the
you
time,
outed us out that we send you questions before. Jeez.
sorry,
We go off
that
script a
out.
lot though too, so don't worry.
Our secret. It's been out. It's okay.
We can edit that part out. We can bleep it over. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I feel like a different part of my brain activates when I'm emailing somebody that's asked a bit more basic question, or maybe I've had an email through from a librarian where they're overseeing an account with 20 to a few thousand users. The assumed knowledge again is very different, and maybe it's a bad thing. I don't really pay attention to how I change the communication. It just kind of seems to come out, and I think I just react to what I'm given. And I will be honest, there's been some times when I've thought of like a second and a third thing to add, and I've decided actually I'll wait for the first response to come through, and then I'll kind of trickle this in for this person. But I've had a few questions from somebody in an email before, and I've written them almost an academic journal paper worth of reply where it's been a couple pages of email. But they were more receptive for that, and they were asking some really high level questions, and I judged, maybe they can get all of this in once. And of course, there's how you structure the email as well. It wasn't one block of text. There were line gaps between questions. There were bullet lists. There was other formatting to make it a bit easier to skim read. Nobody wants that block of text.
Well, and I think that comes down to, again, critical thinking and then trusting your intuition after you've given it a little bit of thought. So I think that's great advice. Don't be afraid to use your intuition when it comes to how you address your audience, but also don't be afraid to use those critical thinking skills and really think through what might this person need based on their question. I think that's great advice.
And I think you also said to kind of follow their lead, to deduce from what they write to you, what is their level of technical knowledge, what do they need, so what is their ultimate goal for this email, and how can I organize this information where it's not scary, intimidating, or something that they won't want to read, because you're right, no one wants to read a whole block of text. I also want to continue on audience awareness, because you have such a high level of audience awareness from talking with you. Yet we have talked before, and you've indicated that you're comfortable discussing this, that you do have autism. And autism has a notorious reputation for making audience awareness difficult to have. So what are some challenges that you've faced in writing or in analyzing your audience due to autism? And are there any sort of effects that you get positive from your autism for those specific areas?
It's an interesting question. So I was actually diagnosed when I was 18. And so I had a long kind of portion of my life where I had verbal and written communication that I didn't necessarily know that my brain worked differently. So there was kind of lessons and there were adaptations. And, when you're a kid, you ask your mum, like, oh, why did so-and-so laugh when I said this? And you kind of learn about social communication. You learn more about academic communication from that way as well, because it's the more formal language. And I think because I had a lot of time where I had to kind of figure it out on my own, and then I had this learning journey post-diagnosis that in terms of my work, I don't think I've had any challenges with communication, fortunately. I did have some really bad grades in English in secondary school where I didn't explain something well, and there were times when I had feedback at university on written work I did a practical degree to get away from writing work, and I've ended up doing quite enjoying writing. I've been doing it, quite a lot of it, for my career. But there were times when I had some constructive criticism at university that I copy and pasted all of them into a document, so I could always refer back to the more brutal comments to make sure that I wouldn't make the same mistake, because nobody wants to get the brutal comment twice. You want to fix that. And I think the positive side of it is related to the hyperfocus that I can get into. I can get really locked in on something, which I've PhD and with scholarship, I think two particular examples where I've had to know everything, and I've become an expert in my niche, my PhD, and with scholarship, I've been able to pick up essentially every single possible feature that we have and be able to explain this really well. So having that knowledge has essentially enabled me to understand the systems well enough that I can gauge the audience and communicate to their level, because I've kind of overanalyzed what I'm looking at, I feel.
That's a good strategy that you've had, and I think that can be applied to anyone, is keeping a list of feedback that you get so you can go back and internalize it. What I'm hearing from you is you approach this very logically. You test out something, you see how it goes, you alter it, go, okay, well, this was the feedback I got, and let me change it a little bit. And I think to expect anyone to remember all the feedback that they get, it's too
Yeah.
much, right? Because there's bad feedback too that you have to look at and go, that's not useful to me. I need to toss it out. And I think that's also an important lesson for managers and heads of business teams that want to help their folks, whether those are those with neurodivergence or just writers. And to give them a list, to help them track, and to give them feedback. I think we kind of fall into the no feedback is good news, but that's not really the case. And I found it also interesting, Oliver, that you said, I did robotics to get away from writing. So many of our engineers, our science folks go in that realm because they want to get away from writing. But as an former English professor, I can tell you, you can't get away. It's always there.
There's no escape.
There's no escape.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
based on everything that you shared with us, in your experience, what is your number one rule for clear communication?
So I think between verbal and written, it's very, very different. And I think for written communication, I'm going to bring up the FBR technique: fast, bad, and wrong. And this was introduced to me by a professor called Minahiro Sali, I collaborated with. He's at the University of Warwick. And we were working on, it was my first article as a PhD student. And the writing advice he gave me was fast, bad, wrong. Just as quickly as you can, get everything down on the page. It can be grammatically incorrect. It can structurally look terrible. It can be missing information. But as soon as you've got something written down, you've got something that you can go through and edit. Editing a document is much easier than having a blank page and thinking, how do I get words onto this? And that was essentially how I wrote my entire PhD thesis. It was just, okay, I have this subsection to write, get all of the words down, go back through, be really brutal. No, this bit sucks. Or we could move this bit to the start. Oh, that bit's not grammatically correct. We can fix that now. That's easy. And it made writing so much faster and more enjoyable as well, because I wasn't ever really stuck with a blank page. And with the verbal communication, it's a different approach. And there's this analogy where in your head you can imagine doing a backflip, but you can't necessarily physically do that. But you can hire a gymnastics coach, and you can go to a gymnastics gym, and there's like the foam pit. And you can stand there, and you can do the backflip, and you can fail, but it's safe. You can imagine the skill, but you have to train yourself to have this. And verbal communication is essentially the exact same thing. Go and embarrass yourself talking to a stranger. Build up that kind of confidence in talking to people. There's a public speaking opportunity. why not take it? Graduate school's a really good way to be exposed to, which I don't think is for everyone. I'm going to say I'll go and do a PhD just to learn the verbal communication. But I had weekly presentations that I had to give to my supervisor and bi-weekly to the entire lab. You very quickly become confident in saying something dumb. And as soon as you're confident saying something dumb, all of the smart stuff you say is so eloquent and it just comes out and it just flows. And it's this skill that you just have to keep on practicing, which is brutal because public speaking is frightening. Like going to the first conference where I had to speak and my hands were like vibrating because I was so nervous. And now the idea of speaking in a like the company-wide presentation or talking to somebody at a conference is just like, yeah, just go and do it. And I was the worst at public speaking. Like it was the bane of my existence. And I've been able to train myself from exposure. And also it's all data as well. You know, like you can go, oh, is this opportunity a good one to make a joke? Or should I be super formal? Oh, that person is acting like this. How should I approach talking to them? For example, it's a skill. Unfortunately, you just have to practice it. You can't kind of watch YouTube videos forever on how to get better at it. You have to go and practice. That's unfortunately just how it works.
I love that. I often tell the clients that I work with, practice makes progress, not perfection, yes. But practice makes progress. I think that's a great strategy. Is just keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing. Now, there are 3 questions that we ask every guest here on the Writing Docs podcast. Are you ready for those 3 questions? Drum roll, please.
Let's go.
Okay. My drum rolls always suck. I'm never doing a drum roll again. It always turns out poorly.
We'll see if we can add it in post-production. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right, here are the questions. What is one thing you wish you'd been taught about writing or communication that would have made your professional life easier?
One thing, that's a tricky one. I think if I'd learned the FBR technique sooner, I would have become better at writing faster. But I wouldn't have failed all of the times that I did to get that feedback and to kind of have that emotional response to the feedback where it's, I have a motivation to get better. I think we can maybe change that to fail faster. So then I get the feedback sooner and I can take that with me to the next ones. I have this resource sooner available to me, perhaps.
I like that. As someone who's a little bit phobic about failure, I think that's great advice. I think that's absolutely fantastic advice. Our second question is about a writing rule or a habit that we hear a lot about, but doesn't really serve you much in your actual writing life. And this could be anything from never ending a sentence in a preposition, don't split an infinitive, never start a sentence with and. I mean, the sky's the limit. What's one rule or habit that we hear a lot about, but is sort of not really helpful in the long run?
It's not a rule, it's a habit. And it's just ignore proofreading when you're writing until the end. You will get much higher quality written work done if you just focus on going start to end and then you fix everything at the end. It's why there are programs that will turn off the red underline. And you can, if you use Grammarly, you can pause Grammarly so you don't get the wrong 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, 3 mistakes, because you're immediately going, oh, I can action this. I get that little bit of dopamine for that task being completed. Wrong. Do not do this. Always do your proofreading. Once you've got the content, it could be that you do a paragraph at a time, and then you go back through and proofread it. So you can get rid of all of the red underlines. But if you are halfway through a sentence and you go, oh, I missed an apostrophe on its, you've lost it. There's this study which found that the average distraction costs you 4 minutes of productivity. I am terrible at typing. I dread to think how many iterations of 4 minutes I could lose if I didn't do all of my proofreading at the end. That's my advice. Just ignore the red underlines, turn Grammarly off until you're ready to proofread, FBR it, just get start to end, then go back.
I love that advice. Yeah, that's, again, I'm taking notes. You can't see, but I'm taking notes here. The third question is, what is one thing that you wish people knew about writing or communicating specifically in the corporate world?
In the corporate world, I think one thing to consider is that, you know, when there's a hierarchy and there's somebody senior to you, it can be scary to make a mistake. But if you can show somebody that when you do make a mistake, you can fix on it and improve it, and you're willing to learn, they'll be a lot more accepting of mistakes. And I think, I think the fail fast, I think, approach those learning moments and the opportunities to grow a bit more head on, and you have less anxiety about kind of the overthinking about, oh, how should I structure this email, for example. I'm sending an email to my boss and some company partner or someone. Just as long as you've got the content in there and you've not said something offensive, just hit send. Stop overthinking it. Just, you know, if you do anything particularly bad, it'll be brought up. And I think maybe as well, you can ask for feedback on what you've done. And if there's anything worth commenting on in terms of communication, you can get it there. You can watch other people. How many emails do you get CC'd in each day? You can just see, okay, would I have said anything here particularly different? And you can also remind yourself, am I over-analyzing the corporate language that they've used? No, you're reading the content, you click on the attachments. No, you're just, you know.
This is great stuff. I feel like I've been getting a life coaching session today. This is I appreciate that, because I think you're right. We do overanalyze. And there's a difference between critical thinking and overanalyzing and analysis paralysis.
Yeah, totally.
And you've also underscored the importance of giving feedback and being open to feedback so you can fail faster. And if you can't get feedback from your boss for whatever reason, we do have the Hurley Write coaching to help you get feedback as quickly as you want, so you can perhaps skip the steps of showing your boss your failures if you want. Show them your failures if you want to. Now, Oliver, we also have a segment called Doctor's Diagnosis, where listeners and clients submit their writing and communication ailments, and we write prescriptions to solve their writing woes. So here's our listener's writing ailment, and it comes from someone who just moved into the private sector after recently graduating from college. They say, I have a processing disability where it's difficult to process information that I read and then write about it, yet I have to do this for my job. I'm scared to reveal my processing disability to my boss because I don't want to be seen as weak or struggling. But if I'm honest, I am struggling. I don't want to lose my job. How should I handle this?
It's a tough one. It's from a place where they have an issue that they also don't have the self-confidence necessarily to talk about with the higher ups at their company. I think the good news is you can't be fired for being disabled. And so there's that safety net where just because your brain works in this way doesn't mean that you will be punished. I would embrace assistive technology. There are different ways to process using these technologies vast amounts of information. It could be that your company pays for you to get a meeting recording tool, which will generate a transcript. And then you can control F on that and get that reminder. Or maybe you use a mind mapping tool to visualize all of the information that you're supposed to be processing. And then a lot of these tools as well can help you it will structure that information for you. It's the get feedback. If there's an elder colleague, or if you're on good terms with somebody adjacent to your manager, if you're not comfortable going to them, I would talk to them about how to improve and things that can be put in place with the benefit of your productivity, rather than it being focusing around, I have this perceived self-doubt, or I have this perceived weakness potentially, that I would frame it as wanting to learn and grow, and using some technology to enable that. I think that having something, they're talking about processing information, having something like a transcription tool to record, and then they can read and listen back to the meeting, for example, or maybe they have a one-on-one, they can set that to record, and then they get notes at the end of it that they can refer back to. Because I mean, everyone loves a to-do list, right? I will stop meetings with my boss and say, I'm adding that to the to-do list. And Emma will pause for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, potentially, if I'm writing stuff down. And then we go on. The hard part will be having a conversation. And for that, I think I would say to a family member or a close friend, let me try and run this. Let me pretend that you're the scary person. Help me approach what can be quite a difficult conversation and go from there. There are lots of pieces of technology that can support anyone. I think that's the beauty of assistive technology. It's not an unfair advantage, it's an advantage for everybody, and it also can remove the disadvantage that someone may have. And I would embrace it and see how you get on.
It also sounds like Scholarcy can possibly help this person too, pulling out the highlights and going through that, but you're not letting out any sensitive data. And Oliver, I love how logically you approach everything. You just go, here's the logical step. This is why we do it. This is the outcome that you can get. I love that.
Thank you.
Oh, great advice. Lots for us to think about today. We have been talking with Oliver Back here on the Writing Docs podcast. Oliver, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, and about all of the great stuff you talked to us about today?
I'm on LinkedIn, Oliver Back, and there'll be a photo of me with much shorter hair for free. And if you want to learn about Scholarcy, head over to scholarcy.com and you can learn everything you need to there, or you can drop me an email, oliver@scholarcy.com, and I'll be happy to ramble on about all of the nice things about Scholarcy.
Oliver, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you.
Make sure to connect with Oliver on LinkedIn and check out Scholarcy at scholarcy.com. That's SCHOLARCY.com. This is Hurley Writes Writing Docs signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing.